This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan podcast.
You're listening to the Phillip Jordan Show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the Phillip Jordan Show podcast. I am Phillip Jordan, studio host and producer of Dutton Wolves Football and all writer flashword on college football. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by Bob Rose from Athlon Sports, where he covers New Orleans Saints. We'll be talking about the new head coach for New Orleans Saints that was announced last week there in New Orleans, and Kellen Moore, the Eagles offensive coordinator. We'll talk about potential staff moves, what's going to happen with Derek Carr, and just how does Kellen Moore offense fit with certain other players there with the Saints. Also, what does he do defensively? Because when you're an offensive-minded head coach, your biggest hire is who your defense coordinator is going to be. And then we'll quickly do a whip around and look at all the scores from SEC basketball, especially between Alabama and Auburn on Wednesday night. You check out the Phillip Jordan Show podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Here on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can also check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. You can hit me up on social media at pjordanscc. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com.
Everybody joining me on the show right now. Yes, I am doing this interview from my car. If everybody can know, watching on YouTube and all the other video outlets. But joining me is Bob Rose. You check out his work over at Athlon Sports, covering all things Saints, and his podcast, the Bayou Blitz podcast. And Bob, appreciate you coming on the show and talking Saints. They're in the news with a new head coach there.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Been a while since we connected. And it took a minute for us to get our two schedules coincided, but I'm glad we could.
Yeah, absolutely. Just just some background here. We actually recorded this on Monday, but this is coming out later on in the week when we're having this conversation. Yeah, Kellen Moore, the new head coach, kind of cool deal for him. He didn't really have to leave New Orleans after winning the Super Bowl. Just, hey, I'll hang here. Tell the family or whoever's coming with them, just bring your stuff down. I'm just gonna hang out here where I'm the head coach now.
I'm excited for Kellen. And I kept telling the impatient fans during this coaching cycle that were saying things like, nobody wants to come to work for New Orleans. The Saints don't know what they're doing. They're lost during this coaching hire. And I kept saying no. It was pretty clear to me from the start that they had their eyes on at least one or two guys that were coaching teams that were going on playoff runs. Kellen Moore was obviously one of those guys. Unfortunately for the Saints, Kellen's team went to the pinnacle, so they had to wait till the very end to hire him. But I mean, man, I'm excited for Kellen Moore and his family, to get this opportunity. He's only 36 years old, so youngest coach in the NFL right now, youngest coach in New Orleans Saints history. But you can't deny his qualifications. It's easy just to look at this season and say, the Eagles had one of the top offenses in the NFL, and the terrific postseason run that they went on, especially on that side of the ball, surely clinched him. But Kellen had a lot of success with the Dallas Cowboys during the 5 years he was there too. Cowboys didn't have a lot of team success in the postseason, but you can't fault Kellen Moore's offense. They were right at the top of the heap. Just about every every single year that Dak Prescott was healthy under Kellen Moore, the Cowboys were at the top of the NFL's offensive production. So, for those who wanted the Saints to get an offensive mind in this position, they're hoping obviously for a reincarnation of Sean Payton. I'm not willing to go that far yet, but Kellen Moore was certainly is certainly qualified to get his chance.
Yeah, it felt like, after Sean Payton had left, and then you go with Dennis Allen, promote him to head coach. It seemed like the Saints are still kind of holding on to that Sean Payton, Drew Brees era of, try to recreate that, which, look, Derek Carr can be good at times, but he's not Drew Brees. And obviously, we know Dennis Allen is not Sean Payton. How much is that much a factor, too? It's like just kind of breaking free of the Sean Payton era. Look, that was a great time in Saints history. You won a Super Bowl. But really time to turn the page and look to this new era that could be with Kellen Moore.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you hit the nail right on the head when you said it's just time to turn the page. I don't blame the New Orleans executives and front office staff at all, for staying with Dennis Allen and trying to maintain that continuity that Sean Payton had established. It obviously proved to be a disastrously wrong hire. But like you said, it's time to turn the page. It was time to go outside the building, get a new voice in there, for those players that's kind of been around a couple different places. Again, Kellen has had success pretty much anywhere he has been. Yet he's young too, so maybe he's going to inject some youthful enthusiasm, into what's been a veteran team. And yet the other thing is, when you break continuity, you're breaking ties, you're breaking relationships. So, and I'm not saying that this happened, but the Dennis Allens and even Sean Payton towards the end of his tenure in New Orleans, you establish relationships with these, with a lot of these veteran players, personal relationships, and it no longer becomes a business at times, where maybe in a situation where you needed to move on from a player, you wait a year or two too late. And again, I'm not saying that this happened, because of the relationships that Sean or Dennis had, with the players. But since you've broken those ties completely, you've got to believe that every single one of those players are sitting there thinking, okay, now what do I do to keep my job here in New Orleans? Maybe that puts them on edge a little bit. And frankly, with the way this team in general has played the last 2 or 3 years, they need to be on edge.
Yeah, and then you look at, I think in the present, Kellen Moore, you brought it up. He was with Dallas with Dak Prescott. He spent some time with the Chargers with Justin Herbert. Of course, this past year with Jalen Hurts and that offense. So he's also not a coach that's kind of like tied to a certain kind of quarterback. And of course, Derek Carr being, still there, but still whatever they do quarterback-wise, Kellen Moore can make it work. Where is it more of a running quarterback, which Jalen Hurts is a good passer, or if you want more traditional drop back style passer, that's one of the cool things. What do you think about that with Kellen Moore, just knowing that he can work with any kind of quarterback?
Not only any kind of quarterback, and I know we'll dig a little bit deeper into the quarterback topic in a second, but not only any kind of quarterback, but Kellen Moore is exactly what you want in a coach in this way. You hit it about the quarterback, but the Eagles were second in rushing yardage this year, first in rushing attempts, last in pass attempts. That never even came close to happening during his time in Dallas, because Dallas was a pass-heavy team. So in other words, the Chargers were a pass-heavy team the year he was down there last year. So you're talking about a coach who's able to adapt to the talent that he has, rather than just, as you kind of alluded to, try to force a square peg into a round hole. If your system is adaptable, you're bound to have success. Because Kellen has brought out the best in some of the stars that he's coached. Obviously the quarterbacks, like you mentioned, but Saquon Barkley, AJ Brown, CD Lamb over in Dallas, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. But Kellen's also been able to develop complementary players. Jalen Tolbert over in Dallas comes to mind. A couple of those receivers that he had with the Chargers. Kenneth Gainwell, and Jahan Dotson making a big play in the Super Bowl. Again, it's not just a We're not just talking about a coach, an offensive coordinator, who has, this is my system and these players are going to fit to it. No, he's he's proven himself very adaptable, which makes me excited. Considering this, the Saints aren't exactly void of talent on the offensive side.
So obviously last week when he got introduced, he was asked about Derek Carr, and look, I'm 38. So his hire is making me feel a bit older now.
Welcome to my world.
I remember watching Kellen Moore play at Boise State. And then when he talked about him and Derek Carr played against each other in college, I'm like, okay, and this is starting to get to me now. I'm starting to see guys I watched in college become head coaches in the NFL. But he talked about Derek Carr, but obviously was not committal. He was very non-committal to Derek Carr. What do you think is the best action going forward for quarterback when it comes to the Saints?
Well, and as any coach would, Kellen Moore is gonna go through this roster with a fine-tooth comb. Probably have a lot of one-on-ones, especially with his star, with his key players. Derek Carr being one of them. And I know it was frustrating for a lot of the Derek Carr haters in particular. They wanted to hear Kellen come out and say, Derek Carr's not going to be our quarterback, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go get one through trade, draft, free agency, whatever the case may be. But Kellen took the proper approach. Even if Kellen Moore does not want Derek Carr for his quarterback, it would have been a bad look for that message to come out first in the media and in a press conference rather than behind closed doors between Kellen Moore and Derek Carr. Because of the structure of Derek's contract, I have a pretty strong belief that Derek is going to be a New Orleans Saint this year. The Saints, if they're going to realistically sign any even mid-tier free agents, they need the money that they're going to be able to get from restructuring Derek Carr's contract. Now, does that mean Derek Carr is in the long-term plans of Kellen Moore and the New Orleans Saints? Only Kellen Moore knows the answer to that question right now. But I do think it will become clearer to us, as outside viewers, whether it's fans and the media like you and I, by the way the Saints approach it as we head towards free agency and certainly the draft. Any coach has the right to pick choose his own players, especially at the all-important quarterback position. So you might feel like you're stuck with a Derek Carr this year, but personally, I find it hard to believe that Kellen Moore believes that Derek Carr is the long-term quarterback for his system and what he wants to do with for the New Orleans Saints. And I know that's kind of a non-committal answer, but I will tell you this: I guarantee you, when Kellen Moore had these interviews with the Saints, with Gail Benson, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Lauscha, he had a very particular and specific answer to what are your plans for the quarterback position, not only for 2025, but for the foreseeable future. Again, we don't know what those plans are necessarily quite yet, but I believe it's going to become clear, fairly clear to us soon. But I just got a hunch that, again, because of the way Derek's contract is structured, the Saints might feel like they're stuck with him for at least this season.
And, last part on the offense, of course, he mentioned these guys too as well. And he kind of what you saw with the Eagles, what he did with Saquon Barkley, what the offense did with the run game. You have an Alvin Kamara who, look, right now, probably not on that level. I mean, just got some more tread on the tires than Saquon. But we know what Alvin Kamara is capable of as a running back out of the backfield and a receiver. Of course, with Taysom Hill, anything that can be done. I mean, I think sometimes he serves concessions at halftime. I mean, just give him a job with the Saints, he'll take care of it. So when you see what he did with some of the playmakers with the Eagles and the Chris Olave, his health, the concussions issue, that's a talented wide receiver. So there's pieces in play here on the offensive side of the ball for Kellen Moore and whoever it does come in on the offensive staff to work with.
Yeah, you got to be excited. And, like you said, Alvin Kamara is getting a little bit up there in years as a running back. But you look at what Kellen was able to do with Saquon Barkley, and people forget how talented a receiver Saquon Barkley has always been ever since his days back at Penn State. Well, Alvin is an even more talented receiver. I still believe Alvin Kamara is the best pass-catching back in the NFL. So Kellen's going to be able to use that. You saw the way the Eagles used Devonta Smith. Well, you got Rashid Shaheed, and Rashid has already been making a lot of plays in the under the previous regimes. And you mentioned Chris Olave. Okay, Chris is not a physical receiver like a CD Lamb or an AJ Brown, but you better believe Kellen's going to find different ways to use him. The tight end spot, there's a question about whether Juwan Johnson and his contract is going to still be in New Orleans. But Kellen was able to use the tight end position. Dalton Schultz very well in Dallas. Obviously, used Dallas Goedert very well with the Philadelphia Eagles. So, again, just like any good coach should do, you're going to find out what the best talents of your best players are, and then use them to their maximum abilities while trying to not eliminate, but at least minimize their weaknesses. The Saints have some talented players, and Taysom Hill, as you said, he can do everything. Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. Those are four guys. I guarantee you, any of the other 31 NFL teams outside of New Orleans would love to have any of these guys on their team. So Kellen Moore is probably grinning ear to ear, and what he thinks he's going to be able to do with these guys.
Whenever you hire an offensive coach, obviously one of the most important hires is your defensive coordinator. And obviously last year the Saints, they struggled with that, particularly against the run. Gave it like 141 yards on the ground, bottom 3 in the NFL total yards allowed. Seeing some stuff online, Brandon Staley could be a name. Of course, that's somebody that Kellen worked for with the Chargers. And look, Brandon Staley's one of them guys, kind of like Dennis Allen, tremendous defensive coordinator, maybe just not fit to be a head coach. What are you hearing and seeing about what you think he could be doing there at defensive coordinator?
Well, I mean, first of all, what you said about an offensive coach hiring the hire defensive coordinator is about most important. That's what I've been telling people too. That just as important as the head coach hire is going to be is who he's going to hire as his assistants on both sides of the ball. And we have been hearing from the start that Brandon Staley is the front runner for the position. There are ties there, and I agree with you. Brandon is a good defensive coordinator. I think the important thing to remember is since Kellen Moore is an offensive guy, he's going to be in charge of that side of the ball. We've already heard Kellen say he intends to call plays, at least initially, regardless of who the offensive coordinator hire is going to be. So therefore, when you have a guy like that, that's whose expertise is on one side of the ball, then you need to have a coordinator on the other side who has a lot of experience. And Brandon Staley gives you that, not just as a defensive coordinator, but as a head coach. And essentially, whoever the defensive coordinator is going to be the head coach on that side of the ball. Now, personally, I like the other interviews that they've lined up. The Saints have already spoken to Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach for the Eagles. But he's a younger guy, 33, 34 years old, but he's had a lot of success in his area. But he's never been a defensive coordinator. Same with Durante Jones, the defensive backs coach for the Vikings. He has been a defensive coordinator for one unsuccessful year at LSU and never on the NFL level. So again, you circle back to Brandon Staley. He's a guy who does bring experience to the table, and I think that that's going to be very important. I would love to see him bring in a guy like John Hurt, the defensive line coach for the Eagles. After you saw what that line did to Patrick Mahomes and company in the Super Bowl, and I love Christian Parker too. But based off of the interviews and the people that we're hearing mentioned for that position, you got to believe that not only is Brandon Staley the front runner, I got to think it's his job to lose.
All right, final question. They have the number 9 pick in the draft. So, Bob, I'm going to put you in the Saints war room. You get to make this pick. Now, I've even seen some articles about maybe stretching for a quarterback of that spot with Jackson Dart. That's been a name I've seen mentioned in some articles. Of course, you look at the defense side of the ball. Obviously, there's needs there. If you were to tell the Saints, hey, you need to pick this guy or you need to focus on this position, where do you think the Saints should go with their first-round draft pick?
Oh, gosh, because like you said, there are so many needs. And what if a guy like the Boise State running back, Genty, falls to them at 9? How are you going to leave a talent like that on the board when you could pair him with Alvin Kamara? Personally, I'd like to see the Saints trade down. I know Mickey Loomis has never done it in 20 some odd years as general manager. And when I say never done, I mean ever. Has he ever traded down in any round? But I'd still like to see the Saints do it because this is an aging team, with needs everywhere. I mean, safety. You talk about the Georgia kid at safety, or Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. Edge rusher. What kind of you need a difference maker there because the Saints don't have any right now. Now that Cam Jordan's past his prime. I've seen wide receiver too. The McMillan kid from Arizona, big bodied AJ Brown, CD Lamb type of player. Quarterback wouldn't surprise me either. I know, this year's quarterback class is not considered, not highly regarded, and all of us expect Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders to be off the board, and there are still so many others. Yeah, I'm hearing Jackson Dart too. Have also seen Jalen Milroe, and the draft pundits will fire back saying, well, they're not first round picks, especially at 9. Here's the thing to remember: Kellen Moore's the new coach. Kellen Moore has got to have a plan at quarterback. We just mentioned that. If Kellen Moore believes that Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, or anybody else is the guy he wants to run his system, he's going to draft him at 9. It's just that simple. Now, I find it hard to believe that that's at the end of the day that's what happens. I can see this. Again, Moore's an offensive guy, but we've just outlined the offensive talent that the Saints have. The talent that they have on the defensive side is far less. You're talking to Mario Davis, 35 years old, Cam Jordan, 35 years old, Tyrann Mathieu might not even be a Saint, at this time next month. And the lack of difference makers at edge rusher. I kind of feel like that's where the Saints are going to go. There's a couple guys from Georgia. What if Abdul Carter from Penn State falls? James Pierce from Tennessee. Those are all guys that will go somewhere between pick 5 and pick 12, 13. So at least one of them should be there, if not a couple, for the Saints. But before I go throwing out specific names, though, you got to wait to see who the defensive coordinator is. Mm-hmm. In the past, we were always able to say, so-and-so doesn't fit the profile, or so-and-so does fit the profile at edge rusher, because it was very clear, under Dennis Allen, what kind of player the Saints liked at that position, or what kind of player the Saints like at safety or linebacker. Well, all those prototypes go out the window now. But I still kind of feel like the Saints are going to go a defensive difference maker in the first round and kind of focus on the offense, in the rounds after that.
It's going to be interesting. Like you said, you still got to know what the defense coordinator is going to be, and really his offense staff. So it's going to be an intriguing next couple of months for the Saints, free agency and the draft. And Bob, it's been a lot of fun having you on, talking all things Saints. If the listeners, viewers want to check out online, where can they find you?
Well, and like you said, we're going to have plenty of news, coaching hires, free agency moves, draft profiles, draft news, and we're going to cover it all at Athlon Sports with myself and John Hendricks, the editor of Inside the Saints at Athlon Sports. John and I also post our personal articles on our personal social media pages, which mine is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 on X or Twitter or whatever you're calling it now. And I also post the links to my weekly show called the Bayou Blitz. I co-host that with Brendan Boylan, usually every Wednesday night, but you could check that out either in the Bayou Blitz Facebook group, on my social media pages, or Bayou Blitz Pod over on Twitter and or YouTube as well. And if you do, you can also catch some of our past shows.
Everybody, go give Bob a follow to keep up with all things New Orleans Saints. It's going to be a fun off season, but anyways, well, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to getting to do this again.
Phillip, it's been my pleasure, and I can't wait to do it again. Let's not be strangers. There's going to be a lot to talk about this offseason.
All right, and once again, thanks to Bob Rose for coming on this edition of the podcast. Real quick before we get out, this is coming out on Thursday last night. The Auburn Tigers were back in action. Really was going to be intrigued to see how Auburn responded to their win over Alabama on Saturday. This situation where, hey, you feel good about yourself, everybody's talking about you, you celebrate the Alabama win too long, then you could lose your next game. Auburn was not great offensively, but neither was Arkansas. Auburn to beat them 67-60 to go to 24-2 on the year, 15-11 for the Arkansas Razorbacks, who were one of those bubble teams trying to find their way into the NCAA tournament field. Janai Broome was the only starter in double figures with 16 points. He had 13 rebounds as well. Off the bench, Chad Baker-Mazzaro had 15 points. Once again, we saw his emotions get the best of him. He got a technical in the second half after hitting a three, taunting the Arkansas bench. I mean, it's kind of one of them things with him. You don't want him to lose his passion because that's what makes him so great. But sometimes he does need to reel it in a little bit, because I just got to worry if you're Bruce Pearl team. I would. At some point, will that come back to haunt them? Chaney Johnson also had 14 points off the bench, 6 rebounds. And Chad Baker-Mazzaro, if you listen to the postgame show on the Auburn radio network, talked about where it was his idea to come off the bench. I felt like the team's been playing better with him coming off the bench with the current start lineup. So that was the deal there. Neither team was good from three. Combined 7 of 43 from three-point land. Arkansas did go up 1 point with 3:06 left in the game. It looked like Auburn may be up for an upset. Last time they were number one in the country a couple of years ago, back to Jabari Smith, Walker Kessler year, Arkansas was one to upset them. But Auburn would go on a 16-0 run. Big for Auburn, 16 second chance points in the game. So now Auburn will host Georgia. Luckily, they're not going to Athens. Athens seems to be a nightmare place for Auburn, but let's see. They take care of business against Georgia on Saturday when they're at home. Alabama lost their second game in a row. They lose to Missouri, number 15 Missouri, 110-98. Put Alabama at 21-5 on the year. Missouri goes to 26. Missouri is like one of those under-radar teams you don't talk a lot about, but they're a really good team. Missouri had big performances. Martin Mitchell had 31 points. Caleb Grill had 25 points, 10 rebounds. Mark Sears should have his season best with 35 points. This is the second game in a row Alabama did not hold a lead, because they tied Auburn at one point, but they never could get over the hump there. Auburn started with a 9-0 lead on Saturday. Here, Alabama gets off to another bad start. Nate Oates had a call an early timeout. He got a technical in the game too, but 12-0 run to start for Missouri, 10 first half turnovers there too. For Alabama, it cost them. Now, Alabama will turn around. They will host Kentucky on Saturday, who beat Vanderbilt on Wednesday night, 82-61. They are 18-8 on the year, so it's going to be interesting. Another interesting Saturday of basketball coming up. And that's going to do it for today's podcast. Again, thanks to Bob Rhodes for coming on. Fun talking with him about all things New Orleans Saints. We'll jump into some more probably college basketball stuff, SEC hoops, and other stuff like that next week. Also, the Sun Belt conference standings are heating up as well, so we have to touch on that as before. Remember, you can follow me on social media at P. Jordan SEC, the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube. Email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. And guys, please check out the show. Appreciate it. Till next time.